Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our fine wine collection tasting. My name is Ewan Murray. I'm one of the event managers in the Wine Society's Tastings and Events team, and I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Gil Riggans, also events manager. Evening, Gil.
Evening. Evening all.
This is one of around almost 200 events that we're doing this year, 160 of them in person and 30 or 40 of them online. So we're delighted to see you. Not that we can see you, but we do hope that you also participate, if you can, in our many events up and down the country. To find out more about that, go to the website and thewinesociety.com and click on Events and Expertise in the top bar. Now, while this evening involves Gil and myself chuntering on about the wines that you've got in front of you, it's also an opportunity for participation. Please do have a look at the chat section and fill your comments in there. You can tell everybody where you are, what you're drinking. You may actually be eating something with what we're drinking tonight, so let us know. If you want to ask any official questions, if you like, go to the Q&A section and we'll try and get through those as well as the evening goes on. So chat or Q&A, they're the two ways of getting in touch. I think Q&A, I'm not sure whether everyone else can see your question. Chat, everybody else definitely can. So we'll endeavour to get to as many of those questions, if you have any, as we do. If you miss anything and you feel we've gone too quickly, never fear, because we are recording this onto YouTube for broadcast tomorrow and forever in posterity.
Absolutely.
So we'll be there, and so will you. If you're watching on YouTube, of course, then you have the luxury to pause and rewind as you go. A quick note before we get started. Sent an email last week saying that we may shift the order of the wines. We've had a quick taste this evening, and we've decided we're going to stick with 1 through to 6. So the sweeter Riesling, wine number 2, will come before the Master Daumas Gassac Blanc. We think it stands up to that very, very well. Now, the first fine wine collection of the year was launched just yesterday, and this 6 wine tasting was designed a few months ago in order to go along with it. One of the risks of planning something in advance like that is that sometimes you look at the list of wines that are there and all of a sudden they change a little bit as the weeks go on. So you will find that if you go online or when you receive your printed copy, that the Rioja that we're tasting tonight isn't actually in the offer. It was obviously so damn good that it sold out before we even got there. So that particular Rioja is not in the not in the offer, but all the other 5 wines are. As ever, the buying team and fine wine manager Sean Kiernan have put together a splendid array of wines in this collection. If you haven't seen it already, I'd strongly advise you to go to the website, go to the fine wine section and click on fine wine collection. I'm just going to list some of the countries that are featured. We've got Cyprus, Argentina, Western Australia, Provence, Austria, New Zealand, Portugal, Germany, California, the Rhone Valley, Sicily, Alsace, Chile, South Australia, Savoie, and Germany, just to name a few. And those are in the small wonders section. And then we've got some special features on Burgundy, Gigondas, Bordeaux, Loire, Italy, Rioja and Ribera del Duero, Sherry. There's a mixed case of 3 of some Enramas from Lustau, which really took my fancy, and a producer feature of Master Daumas Gassac. And we'll be obviously tasting one of those later, and another little gem in there, 6 bottles of 2022 Cru Beaujolais, which really took my fancy. So it's a brilliant selection, £16 through to £105. So there's something to push the boat out for everybody. Anyway, sales pitch is over. I'm now going to pass to Gil, and Gil's going to take us through the first of our white wines this evening, which is from New Zealand. Gil, over to you.
Absolutely, yes, thank you. Thank you, Ewan. Before I do, I'll just address a comment that's popped into the chat here from a member. Yes, the email on Friday did state that the number 2 wine, as is listed in the tasting pack, the Master Daumas, would actually be the 3rd wine that we'll taste, but we are reverting back to the actual pack. So these packs, if you have them. So we're going to be tasting in that order of 1 to 6.
So Pinot Gris, then Riesling, then the Master Daumas Gassac Blanc, in that order.
And so to that first wine, and as Ewan has mentioned, this is from New Zealand. It's our Prophet's Rock Pinot Gris 2022 vintage from Central Otago. I'm just going to pop up a quick slide I think we've got here. So bear with me and let me just pop this up just to show you where we're talking. So here's our map. I'll get my pointer as well. So here's our map of New Zealand. Prophet's Rock, as we can see from the star, is just, hopefully you can see this cursor. We're at the South Island. We can see here we're at the very south of the South Island. It's arguably the most southerly wine region in the world. I think there are some more recent.
I think the Chileans and the Argentines
may
have
well
a bit of a competition on that one.
Absolutely. But we can see, certainly from New Zealand's point of view, it is the furthest south. It's also, Central Otago is also the only semi-continental climate wine region of New Zealand. So what I mean by that, and I'm just going to get the cursor out, it's distracting me, is very warm, dry summers, very cold winters. So quite a stark difference in terms of the spring, all the seasons. So certainly from summer and winter. But we are in, here we are. So this is a cracking picture, I think, of Prophet's Rock vineyards. So Prophet's Rock are an estate that were founded in the late 1990s. They planted in Bendigo, which is one of the 6 sub-regions within Central Otago in the 1999, 2000, so late 90s, early 2000s. And really their vision was quality production rather than quantity. And they sort of bore that fruit when they employed a chap called Paul Pujol in 2005, head winemaker, still head winemaker there very much. And he's a fantastic viticulturist, winemaker, fantastic individual, actually. We've had the pleasure of meeting him a few times. But his focus is very much on expression of terroir, expression of the place of the grape variety, minimal intervention, which is actually a bit of a thread between all 6 of these wines, I would say. So if I bring up the next slide, here's the wine itself. So this is their Pinot Gris. So as I say, Paul Pujol joined in 2005. He started life as a winemaker in Marlborough, as many New Zealand winemakers did, and certainly possibly still do. But it was really that ethos of minimal intervention and really allowing the soils and the vineyard sites and the topography, everything to play the dominant role within the wines of Prophet's Rock, and his wines came when he was head winemaker at an Alsace producer, Maison Kunstbach. They were founded in 1795. He was winemaker there some 200 years later, and he became the very first non-French head winemaker. So quite an accolade, and the right decision on their part for absolute certainty. He's also worked with Lemelson in Oregon before now returning to New Zealand, and as I say, 2005, heading up the head winemaking here. I'll stop showing my slide now. But a truly excellent wine, a great starting point, I think. We've set the bar high with the very first wine here. Yeah. And this is our Pinot Gris. So Prophet's Rock have 3 single vineyards. They've got Home Vineyard, Rocky Point, and Copperway Delta. I think the image that we showed there may have been the Home Point, so a fairly kind of undulating hills, a lovely sort of open plan. But Bendigo, which is the sub-region, is the warmest of all of the 6 sub-regions of Central Otago. It's based on the kind of northeastern border of the region there and around the Lake Dunstan. But it's very warm in this region. The majority of the fruit for this wine comes from their Rocky Point vineyard. I've got the glass here. That's what you might not be able to see me sort of swirling it just off camera. But this comes from, as I say, mainly from the Rocky Point, as the name might suggest. Lots of very stony, very rocky, kind of rugged outcrop vineyard here. It's one of the steepest vineyard sites as well in all of Central Otago. So quite the opposite of the picture that we saw, but that was one of their other vineyard sites. But I think you really do get a sense of this warmth. I'm just seeing here, getting pineapple, sweetness, definitely getting that kind of ripe fruit character you get with Pinot Gris when we're in these warmer climates, and we definitely have warmer climate here. Lots of sunlight, lots of sunshine hours, very steep slopes. We get great aspect. It's north facing. But because of this kind of, the region's very much surrounded by the Southern Alps. It's quite protected by the very wet westerly winds that come across. So it helps with the dry, it elongates the growing season, which Pinot Gris in particular, Riesling, another grape variety, love. It lengthens the growing season, slows everything down, cool breezes coming down the mountains at night. And so we end up with these wines of great power and precision, focus, but elegance and finesse. So you get all that lovely stone and tropical fruit that we're picking up, tropical taste, pineapples, but definitely with more than a lick of acidity and real cleanliness on there. Great expression of Pinot Gris. And I'm going to have a little taste.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting. Someone's saying they just come back from New Zealand and Pinot Gris are among the best wines that they tasted.
Yeah.
I think when you go to New Zealand, there is so much Sauvignon Blanc, so much Chardonnay that actually it's in particular the former, that it's actually a wonderful relief sometimes. I mean, those wines that they're doing are excellent, but actually to change grape variety and come to something like Pinot, particularly when it's made by someone like Paul.
Yes, absolutely. And these are, so the grapes here for all of Prophet's Rock wines, it's all hand harvested. So manual harvest and manual sorting, sustainable viticulture, and as I said, that minimal intervention very much as well. What I like here is we've got the very precise harvesting date, 8th of April 22. These grapes were harvested. It's aged for 8 months on its lees, just to add again a bit of body and a kind of almost a kind of yeasty sort of, I don't know, like a bready biscuit character sort of starting to come through a little bit there. But it's got a wonderful weight and structure on there alongside that wonderful fruit as well. So as I said, a cracking way to start.
I quite like the warmth of it on the back palate as well. There's a little bit of spice there as well.
Yep.
It's very clearly Pinot Gris. You've got those apples and a little bit of lanolin-y kind of thing going on there as well. Sort of almost oily, but just a really smooth, almost unctuous texture.
Yeah.
But we said, you saw on the sheet we talked about the text sheet just before, it's a dry wine as opposed to bone dry. The Wine Society, we have gradings from 1 through to 9, which is bone dry through to luscious, and all points in between. And this is a number 2, so it's still dry, but just beginning to feel a little bit of warmth and richness in there. But that's delicious. Yeah.
Well,
very good.
New Zealand Pinot Gris, this is a beauty. Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Yeah,
totally. Liking that one. Well, I'd love to carry on drinking that one, but we have to move on. We're going to move on to wine number 2, not on your original hymn sheet, as we said, but wine number 2, as it says on the back of the box. So we're talking about the Maximin Grünhaus Abtsberg Riesling Kabinett von Schubert 2022. Order.
Beautiful.
Thank you. That's about the limit of it, but there we go. So yes, we're now coming to Riesling. As members of the wine trade, we might say we're coming home. And very often, if you find somebody who says their favorite grape variety is Riesling, they've either been drinking German wines for a very long time, or they're members of the wine trade. And I certainly count myself amongst that. This is, as I said, from the winery from Maximin Grünhaus, and we can see here, if we just share the map, we've got a map of Deutschland there, Germany, and in the far left-hand corner there, you can see the star, which is where the Mosel River comes in from France and flows towards the Rhine. And then if we look on the map on the right-hand side, which is easier to see and you can tell with the colours, the wiggly bit, which goes from Maximin Grünhaus all the way up to the blue bit, is the Mosel Valley. In particular, from just about where the star is of Maximin Grünhaus, they're just a little bit to the northeast of Trier, and that's where the Slate Hills really start. And you can see if you can see there's a very, very wiggly bit, in particularly wiggly, the first bit, and that's where the steepest slopes are, coming in from Luxembourg and France and all the way down the Rhine there. It's some of the most beautiful wine country, as you can see from this picture, almost romantic. It flows in Germany from Perl, which is on the Dreieck, which is where the countries of France, Luxembourg and Germany meet. All the way, it's 145 miles flowing down to meet the Rhine at Koblenz. And they've been growing vines here, a little bit different to New Zealand. They've been growing vines here for over 2,000 years. And the Mosel, with around about 9,000 hectares of wines, is Germany's 4th largest wine growing area. Predominantly planted with Riesling on these slaty soils, and it seems to be very suitable for Riesling. The two seem to go extremely well together. We've got, they're fragrant, they're rich in acidity, They've got this lovely fruit to them and often naturally low in alcohol, which is a bonus, I have to be saying, because, well, either you can watch yourself very carefully with your health and you're only drinking wines of 7.5, 8, 8.5%, or if you're used to sort of larger wines, maybe you can drink twice as much. I mean, in as much as you're going to have the same sort of intake, but we wouldn't encourage you to over imbibe certainly on the higher alcohol ones. The wines that we're about to taste, or that we are tasting, maybe, is Maximin Grünhaus Abtsberg Riesling Kabinett. Now, the Maximin Grünhaus winery, just to the east of Trier, and the first written record of this, a little bit different to Paul's estate in New Zealand, which was about late 90s.
Late 90s.
This was in the sort of mid-60s, the 960s.
Yes.
966, when the land and buildings were gifted by Kaiser Otto to the Benedictine monks of the Order of Saint Maximin, who had a monastery on the site and had an abbey. And so they had that abbey from the 10th century all the way through to Napoleonic times, when the French were governing this part of Germany, and the abbey was deconsecrated. And then when the French retreated, the von Schubert family bought the property and started making wine. And we're now on the 6th generation of von Schuberts making the wine there. Maximin, obviously named after the saint and after the site, is now in charge. Now, the Abtsberg, which is the vineyard and the hill on which this vineyard finds itself, Abtsberg means Abbot's Hill. And it was the privilege of the abbot of the monastery to get the best parcel, and consequently his best bit of the vines was called the Abtsberg, or the Abbot's Hill. This is a monopole vineyard site, which is to say that the whole vineyard belongs to Maximin Grünhaus, and it's quite rare for that to happen, but they actually own 3 monopoles. There's the Abtsberg, there's the Brüderberg, and the Herrenberg. And I quite like I mean, it's a bit classist to say this, I guess, but of course the Abtsberg at the time was the best slope, so the abbot had that bit. And then you had the Brüderberg, which was the hill or the slopes of the brothers, so the monks had the next bit. And then you had the Herrenberg, which was just for the lay people, which was the next category. Nowadays, the 3, I mean, the way the von Schuberts farm the land, very much they've each of their own ilk. They've each got their own particular characteristics. But the Abtsberg is a grosser Gewächs, so we're talking Grand Cru on the Abtsberg. So that's still the top of their sites. You will have seen from the picture before the lovely sort of downward slope down to the house. Some of the slopes on the Abtsberg go down up to 75% gradient. So you're roping up. You're pulling yourself up. The harvesting is quite interesting. Not a lot of machine harvesting going there. Not even horse harvesting. No. Not even. Yeah, it's just all being done by hand, and you're well and truly strapped on and crampons and all the rest of it. It's totally bonkers.
Look up the hill rather than look down it.
Absolutely. So let's have a quick look at this one. I'm gonna give it a sniff, and it's very clearly Riesling. Now these wines are made using wild yeasts from the vineyards, and in small old vats or Fuder. So these are 1,000-litre vats, so a bit bigger than barrels, and it's all old wood. But the wood is grown in the forest, in the Grünhaus forest, so it belongs to the estate. It's on the estate, so there's not a lot of wood miles and a lot of going on between the trees and the winery, and because the oaks are growing on slaty soil, it's not very fertile, so they take a long time to grow. They grow slowly, and therefore the grain of the oak is really tight. Put that together with the fact that they don't put the wine in new oak, but where that goes, I don't know, whether it's used for other wines or lesser wines and the like, and for a very short time. But eventually the oak matures, gets older, develops, and you don't get any oak influence of the wine. You might get a little bit of rounding and a little bit of micro-oxygenation, but you really don't get any oak flavors in there.
And with Riesling, I suppose it's relatively rare to find any kind of oak aging, even if it's old oak, which won't impart any character of itself. But Riesling being that aromatic grape variety, we don't tend to associate it with oak.
No, and yet these guys, they've always been doing it this way. So it's not your stainless steel, not your concrete. I mean, they will have some of that, but their top wines are still done in these. these wines. 22 was a really, really hot summer. A lot of drought. Thankfully, I mean, it's always the case in wine. Thankfully, we were saved by the rains in September. But there wasn't an Indian summer, so it wasn't that all the ripening happened during the summer. And in Germany, you know, this far north, it can be a problem ripening sometimes. Less so in these days of climate change. But it was very good. And James Suckling, I'll just quote from James Suckling, the American wine writer, who called this a prototypical Riesling Kabinett with a stunning interplay of white tree fruits, some red berries and fresh herbs, with a brilliant mineral acidity that makes you feel glad to be alive. I quite like that, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, Riesling makes me glad to be alive. Super long finish, radically refreshing. And there is some grape sweetness in there, some unfermented grape sweetness, a little bit. While it's Kabinett, which used to be the driest of the German wines, we're still grading it at a number 4, so it's definitely medium / off dry. But that's way in the background. It doesn't come across as overly sweet at all.
No, and I'm just going to, whilst we're tasting this, just pick up a few comments that we've got in the chat here, because I think it's fair to say it's divided. It's always dividing opinion. There's a lot of conversation here about the smells of petroleum. You've got that sort of struck match, that classic Riesling petrol kerosene character. There's one I think that's just come through. What did I see it there? Yeah, smells like Chenin Blanc, hay and wet dog.
Yeah,
but it is quite I suppose a unique character to the wine.
And it's one of those things where, as Riesling develops, sometimes, I mean, this is what we're talking. It's 22, so we're talking 2.5 years old. Just maybe it's still quite youthful, but a little bit of development maybe coming in there, and it gets a bit sort of in wines in adolescence can be a bit temperamental, as we all were. But yeah, for me, it's still got that freshness. It's got that mineral edge.
Yep.
And a very, very light and refreshing wine. But
would you decant this? So if you've got a bottle at home, you know, obviously we're tasting from pack, but would this be one you'd recommend decanting or opening a little better than an hour and a half or so before?
Yeah, no, you could do just so some wines like that. I mean, I've even done that with sort of Premier Cru and Grand Cru Chablis as well. Sometimes where you can decant, and it does make a difference. Just give it that splash of air. The question about it is under a cork closure. Yes, it's a natural cork closure, but it is going to last a long time, well into the 2030s, I think.
Yeah, it's in terms of decanting wine. It's something we often forget when we talk about white wines. We think decanting wines, we're thinking red rather than white. But certainly some of the fine white wines like Riesling, Chenin Blanc is another, Chardonnay definitely, Semillons. There are some that benefit with being opened that little bit, take out the fridge, 40 minutes or so, that sort of 20-minute rule works, but even longer depending on the style of wine and how you like it. But then a lot of the characteristics, the complex nature of each wine just starts to develop a little bit more as it warms up. You know, a little bit warmer to that room temperature rather than the fridge temperature. Yeah, no, absolutely. There's a question about food and wine matching and what it might go with. I mean, my go-to with Riesling is pork belly, roast pork. I mean, I view my glass of Riesling rather in the way I view apple sauce. So you've got the sweetness, you've got some acidity there, but it sort of attenuates the fattiness of the pork. So it goes really well with that. But also with sort of light, aromatic, not too spicy food from Thailand, sort of Sichuan, that sort of thing. A little bit of light, sort of northern Indian, but not too hot. Some on the lighter side. Yeah, I mean, and with the Pinot Gris as well. Just to go back to that in terms of food matching, I always think, especially with this wine, and one of the style, I go absolutely to Thai, really fresh, aromatic, light spice character, but just very fresh and intensely flavored dishes. I think this wine really pairs up beautifully with it. It's structured enough and round enough that it'll support itself with all of that character on the plate, but the acidity just cuts through all of that. You know, you might have a sharpness of lime, for example, or things like that. And that spice, it just works beautifully with it. And that it's not a sweet wine, as we mentioned, but there's just a little hint of something there.
And it's long. I've still got those flavors. I've got some lovely sort of flavors of red apple still hanging around there as well. A little less on the tropicality, but it was sort of that richness. And I think Margaret's right. It is a nice summery wine, chilled down, open for a while, chilled down nicely, and a spicy curry. Well, why not? Spicy curry. Yeah.
There is a question as well. Just you mentioned about the 7-8%. So we've got a question about you know, why is it 8%? The Maximin Grünhaus. Do you happen to know? I'm putting you on a bit of a spot here. I've got my theory behind it without actually knowing.
Well, it's I think generally you'll find the sweeter the wine, the lower the alcohol, because less of the alcohol has less of the sugar has turned to alcohol. And Germany, I think, being an area where it's traditionally been harder to ripen grapes, so you're going to get this. So each year you'll get wine growers who, he may make it Kabinett one year, but may not even make it Kabinett because the ripening, the wines, or sort of not so much the ripening, but there's a lot of or if it's very ripe, there's a lot of sugar in there. You can't turn all of the alcohol, get it the right way around here, all of the sugar into alcohol. And therefore you're left with that residual sweetness. But it's a natural sweetness. It's not like, I mean, Sauterne is a natural sweetness, but that's caused by the rotting of the grapes and the concentration of the juice and the sugars. Whereas here, it's not. It's very much a more naturally occurring things in more northerly climes. Would you agree?
Yeah, yeah. And I think if I'm seeing a wine at 8%, prior to tasting it, if it's at that sort of percentage, 7, 8, 9%, I'm going to expect some residual sugar. I'm going to expect a little bit of a sweetness to the wine. It might not necessarily be dominating it, but it'll balance against that very high acid, which I'd also suspect as well. And we get that. I think the wine's beautifully balanced. It's got that searing sort of high acidity that Riesling is well known for, but that bit of sweetness and roundness just balances it all out beautifully.
And yes, good point from Jeff and Jane here. When they say it's not as complex as they were expecting, and I think that will happen with age. Goes well with Délices de Bourgogne cheese. Absolutely. Riesling and the Pinot Gris before. Great cheese wines. Any white wines that have got good acidity, they either go with, because some cheeses are indeed acidic, or they cut through the fat of those cheeses. So I'm definitely one to give the shout out for white wines with cheeses rather than red.
Yes, very much.
But yeah, no, very good. So that's our Riesling. From Deutschland, and now we're going to move on. We're going. Where are we going next? Oh, I know. We're going to the south of France.
We're going to the south of France.
Oh, nice.
Absolutely, yes. And the final of our white wines this evening, and this is our Master Daumas Gassac Blanc. So again, like the first two wines, this comes from the 2022 vintage, and really, I mean, I'll get to it, but it's a bonkers blend. There's so many great varieties in here. I'll see if I can bring up the screen. Our slideshow here. Let me move this along. There we go. So I'll start really, yes. So Mas de Daumas, we're in the Upper Gassac Valley. So it's a stone's throw really from Montpellier. We can see on the graphic here in the Pays-d'Oc region. We're in southern France, beautifully warm, as we might suspect. But it was founded in sort of 1971 or late 60s, early 70s, and a couple, Véronique and Aimé, am I pronouncing? Aimé. Schubert, they moved to this region. So he was originally a Parisian glove maker, but they moved to the region as Véronique got a job at the University of Montpellier. She's an expert, I believe, in Irish history. I think she's got a job there, but so work in the urban environment of Montpellier, but they wanted to get out of the urban life and out of the city. And so they purchased this very rundown, isolated farmhouse. It needed a huge amount of, I'm just looking here. I can't quite remember exactly what university he was a professor at, but he was a professor of vineyard geology. And he came round to see them. And one, I'd like to sort of think it was I'm coming round for the weekend to see your new place. And he spent hours, by all accounts, just looking around around their land, around this sort of very, as I say, isolated, these beautiful kind of rolling, sweeping hills that have this garrigue, so kind of aromatic scrubland. We'll show a picture in a moment. But it sort of dawned on him, the geology, the soils, the topography, everything was of high quality. And he was saying the only other time he's sort of seen that kind of geology was in the Côte d'Or and the Grand Cru Côte d'Ors of Burgundy. So he advised them off the back of that they might look into planting some vines and maybe go down this path. So they did, I suppose, what any of us would do. They got in touch with as many experts as they could get hold of, as they could, and consultants as they could. And they decided to plant Cabernet Sauvignon, I think was the very first grape variety that they planted. And red wine was the very first wine that they produced. So 71, as I say, they kind of officially kind of purchased and got the keys to this farmhouse. And it was Cabernet Sauvignon was the very first grape variety they grew. 78 was their first vintage, which they released in the early 80s. After 2 or 3 years in barrel, they launched the 78 vintage. And at that time, it was 80% Cabernet Sauvignon. But they also planted and had in the blend of the other 20, there was Merlot, Syrah, Petit Verdot, there's Cabernet Franc, there's a whole plethora of different grape varieties. There's Italian varieties now as well in there. There's Dolcetto, Barbera, Nebbiolo. So they've really created a sort of microcosm of all these different grape varieties, French and Italian varietals. But red wine was where they started. In the late 80s, I think it was, I may have actually been, 78 was the first vintage. I'll just double check on the white, which I haven't got here, but I believe it was the 80s they decided to create their first white wine. And that's the sort of incarnation we've got here, the 22 vintage. Is their Daumas Gassac Blanc. I'm going to show a picture now, just of what I mean by those sort of rolling hills, if I can. Here we go. So we can see this relatively sort of flat area here, but we can see what they've done is, again, as I mentioned with the first wine, and certainly with Maximin Grünhaus as well, it's working with the environment, working with the soils, working with the climate, very much this kind of minimal intervention, and organic and biodynamic principles is at a fore, sustainable, definitely. So when they look to plant their vines, rather than, scrub up all of this scrubland, all of this garrigue, they decided to create lots of different parcels. We can kind of see these pockets of vineyards, but with these garrigues, with these scrubland, with these trees and forestry, this kind of classic old Mediterranean forests. And they've got about 50 different parcels that accumulate to about 50 hectares under vine.
So the ants are very busy in that vineyard, aren't
Very
they?
busy. Interestingly, when I looked at this picture earlier, I didn't even realize there were people in the vineyard, unless you've changed the image.
It's almost a Lowry, like a Lowry painting of a vineyard.
But what we have here in this particular blend is like their red wine. It's a huge range of grape varieties. And it starts really with Viognier. I think Viognier is one of the key. They've got 4 key grape varieties that always make up the bulk of this particular wine every vintage. So it's Viognier, Chardonnay, Petit Malsain, and Chenin Blanc. They combine these 48% Viognier in this particular blend, 13 Petit Malsain, 13 Chardonnay, and 9% Chenin, if I've got that right. So that leaves us 17%. I wrote that down so I didn't have to live on air try and calculate that. But there are 8 other varieties, and I just wanted to mention a few. Some might not be so surprising. Roussanne, Marsanne is in here. There's some Semillon in the blend. But Fiano is another variety that kind of...
Why not?
I raise an eyebrow to in a very positive way, because I do love Fiano. And perhaps that's where some of that apricot that I'm seeing there, Jeff and Jane, so the apricots coming through.
The Fiano and the Viognier.
Might well be
Viognier.
But it's got just such a complex character to it with all those varieties going on. It really speaks to incredibly good winemaking, to the craft of blending all these different varieties and creating a wine that's balanced, structured, depth, all that concentration and complexity.
We're talking about all the sort of herbal notes as well there. I'm always getting a little bit. I'm leaning back in my chair on my terrace, looking over the valley with a glass of pastis in my hand. There's almost that sort of aniseedy note just lying over that apricot as well. It's delicious. Really good.
Yes.
I say that my next door neighbour is French, but she doesn't drink pastis. No. So she brought me a bottle around the other day, which was very good. So enjoying that one.
But yeah, so it's still very much the five sons work at the property. They've all been getting more involved in the estate since 2009. So it's still very much a family-run operation. The grapes for this particular were harvested kind of late August, early September. It was over a 5-day period. All these different varieties were picked. But yeah, it's just got a tremendous depth. It's not like any other wine I could describe. Like trying to describe the wine to someone who's not got in the glass. What I love about this one, the first time I tasted this wine was probably around about 20 years ago. Every year, it's a unique blend. It just, the base wines may be the same, but it's different proportions of that. And sometimes they throw the other ones in and sometimes not. Just depends what's ripened best at that time. And they make the decision year in, year out. So it's unique every time.
I love the texture of it. The other two wines slip down a treat. You know, they're quite smooth. You know, the Pinot Gris had that sort of oiliness to it. The Riesling had that sort of freshness and lightness. This one, it's got some real weight.
Yeah.
And almost a slightly grainy texture, which I really like.
Yeah.
Really like.
Yeah. And I'm seeing here a wine that a meditation wine you want to sit and think about. Absolutely. It's that you pour your glass of this, turn off the phone, or put the phone off the hook, sink into an armchair or your sofa at home and just enjoy the glass. A question here from James: is it age worthy? Absolutely. I've not had the great fortune of tasting very old vintages of this wine. I've had some at 4, 5, 6 years of age, and there's certainly some development coming, but there's so much concentration. There's a bright lift, you know, a great deal of acidity in that wine as well. There's the structure, the depth, the concentration, and acids. This is definitely a wine that can age. I'm not sure actually. Do you know what we say for this particular wine?
I don't know what we said. If you look on the sheet there, it should tell us.
Oh,
there's the farmhouse. So we're saying now to 2030. Those of you who follow the Wine Society will know that we're notoriously conservative with our drink dates, because we want to make sure that nobody drinks a wine when it's absolutely past it. But I would say you could probably add 3, 4, 5 years to that
easily. Yeah.
And again, it's horses for courses. Some people like wine that's been developed. Some people like it straight away, straight out the bottle, drink it on the way back from the winery, kind of thing. So it's each to their own.
I think it's in a very good place now. I'm thoroughly enjoying the glass. But yes, it'll be interesting to sort of watch it develop. If I can leave a few bottles alone.
Well, that's the thing. That's always the difficulty when it's a nice one. You need to buy enough that you can watch its development over a period of years, but
and keep it out of the house.
Keep it out of the house so you don't actually drink it. Keep it in members' reserves. Maybe that's the way forward. End of plug. Okay, that's our white wines.
Yes.
Very, very enjoyable indeed. Let's move on now to our reds. We're about halfway through our show, and first time we're going classic. We're going Rioja, an hour and a half south of Bilbao. It is. I have to say, I've visited Rioja on 3 or 4 occasions, and it's one of my favorite wine areas of the world. There's a lot of history there. Rioja is an hour and a half south of Bilbao in the car, and it's on the border. You go sort of up the coast and you go over the Sierra Cantabria mountains and down into Rioja. It's on the border of the Basque country, which became an autonomous region in 1980, and it was given it was divided into 3 provinces, which is basically they were, I'm just trying to remind myself, Guipúzcoa, Vizcaya, which means Biscay, they're on the coast, and then over the Sierra Cantabria, as you see at the top of the map on the right there, and into the red area, which is Rioja Alavesa. Alava being the 3rd province of the Basque country. So the 2 are on one side of the mountain and one's on the other, the Alavesa. The other 2 areas on the left or upstream on the Ebro, you see the Rioja Alta, and then on the right downstream to the east you see Rioja Baja. But we're talking Rioja Alavesa. So it's north of the Ebro. It's sort of the vineyards come down from the Sierra, from the mountains, down to the valley of the Ebro. There's some very old vines there, and that's Marcos Eguren, who's the head of the business. He's the 4th generation, currently in charge with his brother Miguel. The family have been there since 1870. And been growing grapes and producing Rioja wines all through that time. Marcos studied winemaking in the mid-70s, and he took over from his father Guillermo in the 1980s, and he's still in charge now with other members of the family who are working with him. And he promoted the traditional wines of Rioja, the old school traditional wines. But then he was part of the sort of Rioja revolution in the 80s and 90s, which revolución, I suppose, which people actively seeking vineyard sites that gave a sense of place. They allowed the wines to respect and reflect the nature of the individual terroir, with the aim of obtaining the maximum character in the wines and the identity. Now, during his time in charge, they've also they've spread out. They've bought another couple of wineries in Rioja, in different parts of Rioja. They've also got a winery in Toro, down in sort of to the northeast of Portugal, sort of inland there, and also in Castilla y León, so further down south in Spain. So they've expanded this, but their heartland is still very much Rioja. The Consejo Regulador DOCA Rioja, who are the people who govern, they're the Appellation Controle, if you like. They officially classified this vintage, the 2017, as very good, which is something that was never guaranteed because it had a precocious bud burst in March. And then when they thought everything was going fine and dandy, on the 28th of April, which is pretty darn late, they had a severe frost. And that affected about a third of the vineyards, particularly in Rioja Alta and Rioja Alavesa. So they had a third of the vineyards were affected to a greater or lesser degree. And then in the summer, they had a severe drought, hardly any rain at all. So it was a really tough year for the vines and for the growers. But at least with the drought, it meant that the vines were healthy. There wasn't any chance, there's no rain, there was no chance of rot and mildew and that sort of thing. The heat of the summer meant that this vintage 2017 was the earliest in history, the 10th of August. I mean, everybody's on holiday during that time. They're at the beach and hoping to come back sort of end of August, early September, sort everything out, clean the tanks, get that done, and then ready for the harvest. But no, 10th of August, which is ridiculously early. So there was a reduction in yields because of the frost. There was a concentration of less fruit on the vines because of the heat, which made for a real rich and ripe. The Consejo, I'll quote them again. They say, although scarce, the 2017 harvest has offered wines with slightly higher alcohol levels than previous years, endowed with very good structure and high aging potential, which makes it possible to define it as a high quality harvest. Let's give it a swirl. It's 100% Tempranillo, so there's no Garnacha, Mazuelo, Graciano, none of that. 100% Tempranillo. And it's made entirely by vineyards owned by them, so they don't buy the grapes in. It's their estate wine. All around, if you've been to Rioja, San Vicente de la Sonsierra, which is sort of the capital of that Alavesa part of the north. You've got Logroño, and in the middle, you've got La Guardia also on the other side of their vineyards. Beautiful area. If you ever get a chance to visit, please go. The vineyards are amazing. There's really hilly areas coming over the Sierra Cantabria, and the towns are ancient and delightful. And also give you a few restaurant recommendations if you'd like. Yeah, so it's made traditionally. All the grapes were destemmed. There's no whole bunch of stuff there. Aged for 17 months in oak. The legal minimum for a Reserva is 1 year. So 17 months in oak, and then in bottle too for, I think, a year and a half as well. So we're talking sort of release 2021, maybe even a bit later. We were selling it earlier this year. So, but it's made all the oak is 20% of it is new, 80% of it is between 1 and 3 years old, and 70% is French, and 30% is American. So if you like, it's more old school in the style, using the French oak rather than the overtly blousy, vanilla-y, lovely sort of, which I like both styles. It's
well, there's lots of comments about the aroma. Lovely nose on this, lovely aromas here. Not over oaked. I agree. I think the oak is really beautifully used. I'm getting quite a bit of chocolate and vanilla you mentioned there. I am still getting that, but it's well integrated. It's not a dominating feature. It's just there in the background.
It's got the acidity is meant. Some people have mentioned the acidity. There's loads. My mouth is really watering, and the tannins, they're firm, but the acidity and the level of fruit, so it just all balances out lovely. It is still very young, I would say. 7 years on, 7.5 years on. It's still very young. I think it's got a long road ahead of it.
Definitely. But it has that, again, a bit with the Pinot Gris and with the Riesling. I pick up a glass of this and it's instantly recognizable.
It's Rioja. Yeah.
Perhaps because I knew, first of all, but also I'd like to think,
It says so on the box, Gil.
but it has. And aside, it's got that kind of a lifted herbal character on the nose as well. Almost a kind of minty.
Jeff and Jane, you said you love to pick up on the restaurant recommendations. That's fine.
So would I.
There's 2 or 3 that I would thoroughly recommend. And I'll when I send the email out tomorrow with the link to the YouTube the YouTube page with this video, I'll add in those restaurant recommendations in there for you as well. If you remember just one, El Rincon del Vino, wine corner in Logroño, but I'll send that through.
There's a comment as well made, just a bit of a shock after the white wines. It's always quite tricky to move from the white wines that, yes, have that acidity, but obviously don't have that tannic structure.
Yeah.
The first red can, that element of it, the acid perhaps as well, does sort of come more to the fore. But maybe we want to sort of revisit a little bit after we've tasted the other 2 reds as well. If we can keep it.
It's always interesting bouncing back between them anyway. Yeah.
Very much.
Good. Okay, so that's our Rioja. That's Viva España.
Beautiful.
And now we're going to flick back to not too far away from the Master Daumas Gassac, and we're going to go to the Southern Rhone. So, Gil,
we are. Do we have a picture for this?
I think we do. I think we've got a map.
We have a map. Oh, there's our reds.
There we are. 14%. We say 2030 again. I think that's conservative for that.
Yes.
That particular one, but as we say, it's out of stock anyway, that one, so we'll have to wait till next time.
Our apologies. Right, so as Ewan said, we are in Southern Rhone, so we're in the Gigondas region. We can see it here in red, just to the east of Orange. So we have Vaccarat. If I get my cursor up, and if I'm remembering right, I think Vaccarat sort of borders it on that kind of southwest. Châteauneuf-du-Pape's a little bit further over around the town of Orange. And the reason why I mentioned Châteauneuf within this is because we're looking at the Famille Perrin, and their story really starts in Châteauneuf-du-Pape. It starts with Château de Beaucastel in 1909. A gentleman by the name of Pierre Tramier acquired the estate, but it was his son-in-law, Pierre Perrin, and then his son, Jacques, that really sort of took this, developed the estate, developed the vineyards, and brought it to the high quality or the huge respect that it now garners. And it's still in the same family, so we're now 5th generation Perrin, but they've grown quite a bit since then. So I'll get to some of the enterprises that they have. It's not just Châteauneuf-du-Pape and Beaucastel. Of course, it's not. We have a Gigondas from the estate right here. But they, again, like with other producers that we've looked at and the other wines, the focus right from the off was work with the land, let the terroir, let the land, let the grapes speak. And so in 1950, they started organic viticulture. In 1974, they converted Beaucastel, because this at that point was their sole estate. They converted to full biodynamic principles at that point. If we fast forward now, so they're still working on the biodynamic and organic principles very much, and they're one of the leading families in Europe for sustainable viticulture across all of their domains, their estates, the various enterprises. On those, just very quickly, they still very much run Château Beaucastel in Châteauneuf-du-Pape, and gorgeous Châteauneuf-du-Papes they are. But they've also got a negociant wing called La Ville Ferme, which is their, they sort of deal largely with wines from Luberon and Ventoux, so 2 sub-regions of the Southern Rhone, for very good quality sort of fruit-driven styles in the negociant.
Chicken wine, isn't it? Oh, there's the chicken wine.
Okay.
The vieille.
Oh yes,
Sorry. You'll see. Yes. Not. It may go very well with chicken, but it's known in the trade as the chicken wine because it has the cockerel, the hen on the label.
They also own Tablas Creek, or sort of part own. There's a kind of
joint venture
in Paso Robles in California. So they're now outside of France as well with that incredible Rhone varietal wine estate. They're definitely worth tasting, the ones at Tablas Creek outside of this evening, of course, or outside of tonight's tasting. But they have this Famille Perrin range as well. And that's what we're looking at with this wine. It's the Gigondas. If I bring up another slide, let me try and bring up the right one this time. So that's our map. So this shows I mean, you actually picked this particular vineyard out. Do you know? We are Gigondas here, yes.
Yeah.
Let me move across. So here's the wine. So Gigondas Larnier from Perrin. And this comes from their range called Sélection Parcellaire Famille. So this is their one of their sort of higher end sort of ranges from their Famille Perrin range. There's 3 or 4 wines, but the idea here is to really, really, truly show the expressive nature from these regions, from the grape varieties, from the vintage, in the best possible quality available to them. So we can see from here, this is made from 130-year-old pre-phylloxera vines. So these vines are very old. They produce naturally very low yielding crop, but highly concentrated, very high quality, but we're getting really low yields here. So the wine, if I stop sharing the screen and I'll have a look, because I think someone mentioned, wow, the Gigondas is a proper wine. Tannins, this is very full-bodied. I think we even put that prefix of very rather than just full-bodied.
And yeah, I think you're right, Luke. The tannins are a bit chewy, and you know we put conservatively 23 as our end of the drinking window. So yeah, it certainly will develop further. It's already getting those sort of lovely, spicy, leathery notes on there as well.
So yeah, and Gigondas as an appellation, it gained its appellation status in 1971. It's one of the more higher altitudes. Some of their vineyards will rise up to about 600 meters above sea level. There are some cooling influences that, and the cooler breezes coming down the mountain, and winds coming through. So it is one of the more relatively cooler subregions of Southern Rhone. I think that shows in the quality, that sort of the freshness and the energy that their wines typically display, and this certainly does, with that higher and brighter acidity perhaps than others. Within Gigondas, part of those rules and regulations of the appellation, it must be at least 50% Grenache.
This one passes.
Which this one very much passes. There is a little splash of Syrah, I think, in this wine. So, because I think that's another of their rules, is there must be one of Syrah or Mourvèdre. You can have both, you can have other varieties as well, but you have to have at least a portion of one of those 2 grapes alongside that minimum 50% Grenache. So there's definitely Syrah. I think it may be a Grenache Syrah blend. I couldn't quite get the precise. I apologise. After my last wine, where we had down to the 8%.
I think I say it's 100%, so that might not be right. So we'll double check that, and we'll come back to you tomorrow with any clarification.
But I think with that Syrah, because it's got a lot of colour, and Grenache tends to give you slightly lighter colours, more of that kind of red and into black fruit profile, but it ripens very quickly, and the sugar levels accumulate very quickly. So you end up with wines that are very, very rich, very broad. The acidity might not always be as high, but I think that addition of Syrah with its high acid and the colour and that peppery spice, I think, might be coming through from it as well. Just adds that depth, adds a bit of concentration, but certainly makes this a wine that will age beautifully over the coming, more than 5-10 years. I think this wine, even at this stage,
it's a great wine now, but you can it's still something. Leave me be for a little while longer. Yeah, so I'll come knocking on your door when I'm ready.
But 2017 as well was the driest vintage in Gigondas for 30 years. So it was an incredibly warm year. So no issues in ripening these grapes at all. But because of where they're based, because of that elevation and those cooling breezes that come through overnight, I always akin it to sort of the grapes have been basking in sunlight all afternoon, all morning and afternoon, really ripening up, loving that. But you can have a bit too much of that, and you can get worn out by it. So that cooling breeze in the evenings, just passing through the vineyard, it's like popping these in the fridge. They're just chilling out for a little while, and it just slows everything and allows those aromatic characteristics, the acidity, to retain, and a very high quality wine.
Yeah, that's the thing. Belinda's saying she's enjoying it more as the glass goes on. I think that's definitely the case with wines like this. As it's almost it's a slow decant, if you like, and it's often the way, the temperature's changing as well, so you're getting all sorts of influences on that glass. But delicious.
Yeah, and I like that point. Concentration without jamminess. It is very concentrated, very ripe, but yeah, it's not cooked and jammy.
But you're getting that because of the elevation of the vineyards as well. That sort of coolness.
Absolutely.
Delish. Well, time moves on, sadly. Well, not I say sadly, but we're moving on to the next wine, so I'm not sad at all about that particular one. We're going on to our last wine, which is the BaroloTerlo Vigna Costa Grimaldi from Luigi Einaudi, 2017. So again, the 2017. There is a thing, we did pick the wines, the 22s for the whites and the 2017s. I think the theme here with the 2017s, whether it's Spain, France, or Italy, is the heat. Yep. It was a very, very hot summer down there with not a lot of rain. So there is that theme going on there. Now, it's said that Luigi Einaudi, who's started off as a part-time grape grower from Dogliani in Piemonte, where they grow Nebbiolo. He never missed a harvest, even during the long years he spent in Rome, because after the Second World War, he became the governor of the Banca d'Italia for 3 years. And then he became the first elected president of Italy post-war as well, so the new Repubblica Italiana. So quite a character, quite a strong guy. Did an awful lot. It was in 1919, however, that he started bottling wine from the grapes that he was growing in Dogliani. So very much it was Piemonte wines. It wasn't the finer end. There were great wines, not the finer end, the sort of more workhorse end, if you like. And the company was born in 1919 after he decided, rather than just growing grapes and selling them onto winemakers, that he would make the wines himself. But again, it was a part-time thing. He was an economist, who happened to lived in Dogliani and decided and had some vines and decided to do this. And it grew. After him, he was running the company and looking after the vines, as we said, never missed a harvest, even when he was president. His second child, Roberto, took over after Luigi died in 1961, and Roberto took it through the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And then it was Roberto's daughter, Paola, took it over, and really it was her that was the kindled the passion and the renown, if you like, of the estate worldwide these days. She relaunched the brand, she reformed the winery, and more recently in 2017, after graduating in architecture, her son, Matteo Sardagna Einaudi, took over the management of the business and is equally as passionate as his grandfather and his great-grandfather were before him, about the region and about the grapes. Now, Barolo, it was relatively new as far as they were concerned. It was their first purchase in Barolo was 1958. And that was Luigi's last purchase of vineyard. It was 4.8 hectares. And if you know Barolo, if we get the map up, we'll have a look. 4.8 hectares between Novello and La Mora. So there's the oh no, it's not. Here we go. Just bring that up now. There it is. So here we have. You can see you've got the Mediterranean, and then you've got Barolo here, which is kind of on the Po plain around here, but very much influenced by this barrier of mountains around the Alps up there, going all the way around along to Genoa and then down into the Apennines. So there's a lot of mountainous area around the foothills there of the mountains between Turin and the Mediterranean, which again makes for cooler conditions. I've been to Barolo a couple of times. They say you can see the Alps from Barolo. I've never seen them. It was foggy both times. I'm sure the views are beautiful. I see some lovely pictures. Yeah. But if we just bring that map up of the Barolo area. Definitely. So Barolo, this is a tiny portion of a massive map, quite a famous map by Renato Ratti, the winemaker. But Barolo is kind of in the middle of this map. But you can see some really famous names there, like Canubi to the top on the right, Bussia, these fabulous evocative names, the cru of Barolo, the Costa di Rose, and on the bottom left there you see Terlo, and that is where this particular wine is made. The 1.8 hectares of this particular vineyard is the Vigna Costa Grimaldi. And Luigi, when he bought this wine, as I said, it was the company's first purchase. It was his very last purchase. And he was asked why Barolo? Why did he buy something in Barolo? And he said, well, when Barolo was served at my table, there always came the inevitable question, did I make it? It bothered me confessing that it wasn't mine. So therefore I bought these vineyards so I could make it and I could answer people honestly. 2017, as we said earlier, it says the Fil Rouge going through these wines, remembered for its heat and its low rainfall. Winter was mild, spring was warm. There were some late April frosts, like in Rioja, but nowhere near as disastrous. So it caused only limited damage. The summer was hot. The nights were cooler than in previous hot vintages. So again, over-ripeness wasn't a problem. You still a bit like in Gigondas, you know, Barolo is on a hill. You're quite elevated above the plain, so you do get those breezes and cooler evenings. The vintage wasn't as precocious as elsewhere in Europe. September temperatures were lower than expected, so it wasn't an Indian summer, if you like. So it was a normal kind of harvest. The harvest happened mid to late September, still 2 weeks earlier than usual. The average was always sort of October time, but it wasn't as affected by climate change as some of them may be. This is 100% Nebbiolo, as Barolo is. 48-year-old vines, not planted that densely, actually. You hear about, you know, vines, you want vines to struggle, and you hear about people planting them at 8,000 vines per hectare and 10,000 vines per hectare. Here we're under 5,000 vines per hectare. So there's some nice spacing in the vineyard. And there's an altitude of 310 meters. So it's just not in the hot plain of the Po, but you're away from that. And it's mainly limestone soil and a southeastern exposure. So again, that southeastern exposure, you get the morning sunshine, but you don't get the beating sunshine of the south and the southeast facing slopes. So again, it's all to do with a lot of finesse. Once you're in the winery, once the grapes are in the winery, temperature-controlled fermentation in stainless steel and concrete tanks. Maceration post-fermentation, so you leave those skins in contact. Racked off after about 22 to 25 days. And you get, you know, it's a beautiful fine color. This, I mean, if you're looking at this wine, it's either going to be Pinot Noir or it's Barolo. Just the color of it.
The color alone,
the color alone, you kind of know it's got that watery rim, but you know, it's just a beautiful color. And I find it always deceptive, because you look at that. Oh, it's a bit like patting a sweet little dog if somebody bites you, because you look at this, you that's going to be nice and light, and then you taste it. It's been matured in oak for many months, and then a long refinement in its bottles, a long aging in bottles. So only recently released. But then you sort of take a taste of it, you take a smell, and it's really quite fragrant. A little bit of sort of licoricey tar going on there. They talk Barolo of tar and roses, almost that anise thing going on there again.
But it has got that rose. It has that the lifted aromatics that Nebbiolo has.
Yeah. Wow. And then, if we're wanting acidity and tannin, wow.
Yeah, we're no longer thinking Pinot Noir.
No, we're not. No, there is one distinct difference in that you can tell when you taste it, and this is what makes Barolo such a fabulous wine, so long lived, such a great food wine, because it's got the acidity to cut through loads of things. It's got the tannin to act as a foil to so much, and with that acidity and tannin, it just goes on and on and on. It can. I can't remember how much we say this is going to last. How long it's going to last? I think we say into the 30s. It's going to be. Oh yeah, there's the vineyard itself. Yeah, that's the very vineyard. So you see quite a slope to it. But yeah, we're saying 2030 again. I would say longer. It's 14.5%. So again, don't be fooled by this isn't a nice gentle looking wine. It's tannic. It's stylish, as we say. It's oak influenced. It's not markedly oak like the Rioja, but it's oak influenced. But all those aromas, absolutely stunning wine. They say the result of a selection of grapes. So they didn't put all of the grapes into this wine. Some of them, the grapes that were of a lesser quality, they put into some of their lesser wines. The intense fragrance, full-bodied but smooth tannins with a long and spicy finish. Over time, it becomes complex. So we're not there yet, but over time, it will become complex with spicy, truffly notes, leather, and that sort of thing. And they say the tannins guarantee a long life in bottle. I think.
Not they need me to, but I agree with that statement. And a lot of people are mentioning lovely wine, but perhaps needs a little bit more time to develop. But that comes down to personal choice as well, preferences.
Yeah.
I actually, personally, I quite like where the wine's at here. Yes, it's very firm. But depending on what I've got on the plate, but if I've got a protein-rich plate of food in front of me, that'll help to soften the tannic structure of the wine out, bring a little bit more of that fruit character to the fore. The acidity will cut through definitely everything else that's on the plate.
Harry's suggesting we meet again in 2040 and taste these red wines again.
We'll go with the exact same wines.
Yeah, absolutely. And they would still be showing very well. Very differently, they'd be showing very well, in a different, but yeah.
So I like the idea. I think I saw there. Yes, Gorgonzola is what we're having with it. Handles the acidity and the tannins. That seems like quite a nice.
The twice I've been to Barolo has been in November, which could be a reason why I saw fog rather than mountains. But that's truffle season, and in Nebbiolo Dolcetto Barbera with truffles is just the most amazing experience. So if you are going to do some tourism and you don't mind some rubbish weather, but you do like the gastronomy, then November is definitely the time to go to Piemonte for that.
Yeah.
I don't have any. Well, I do have one recommendation actually of a restaurant actually there.
Okay.
I think, and I might be. It's at the very top of Barolo, and it's called La Coccinella, or the Ladybird. And Sebastian Payne, who used to buy wines, the Italian wines for the Wine Society, and I went with one of the growers, the Conterno, Roberto Conterno, and we were very lucky to have dinner with him, tasting wines back to the 50s and 60s, which was just amazing. But the food was very rustic, but absolutely perfect for the wine. So La Coccinella in Barolo, that's another place to look up. You'd think that I spend my life just eating and drinking, wouldn't you? But no, that's not the case.
I do now. We have a Gassac was my favourite to drink tonight, the Barolo in 10 years.
Yeah. Very much.
Enjoy a bottle or two of the Gassac as the Barolo matures that little bit.
Yes, I've got quite a bit of Barolo in reserves, waiting for the day, and I'm never quite sure when the day is, but definitely need to. Barolo is one of those days when you look at the drink dates when you're buying wine and you get to a certain age, and some of you may be like that. I'm certainly that way inclined now. When I see drink dates of 15, 20, 25 years out, I'm thinking, really? Although my children say, no, keep on buying, Dad. But Barolo is one of those that is going to last that long, 15, 20 years. So in my dotage, I shall be drinking Barolo. I'm looking forward to that.
Very much. Very much.
But yeah. So there we have it. There's our tasting for tonight. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed it yourselves. We've certainly enjoyed talking to you, and we've discussing the wines, tasting the wines in particular. Unfortunately, not being able to drink too much of them because both of us are driving home, so it's just been a swirl and a swoosh, and that's it. But we hope you enjoyed this tasting. If you've got any more time on your hands coming up, we just want to bring the next slide up, Gil, please. We can just share because we've got some tastings. Keep going. There we go. Coming up.
Hang on, let me
share that screen. I'm way ahead of you.
You're ahead of me.
Always. You should see us in the office.
There you go.
So we've got some tastings coming up. So next week, end of next week, we've got Global Food Staples. It's the next one in the series, which Gil and our in-house chef, Paolo Crastachini, will be taking us through some wines to go with fish and seafood, a whole selection there.
Absolutely.
In the middle of April, Gil and I will be back looking at the Tannat grape. We're not going to be producing a tasting pack for that, but we have got some wines online. If you go to the Society's tasting and events page on the website, you'll find some the wines that we are going to be tasting. And if you wanted to buy one or two, or three or four or five of them, because there will be 5 wines in that tasting. But we're talking more about Tannat than actually than actually tasting and the experience. But that'll be a lot of fun. Tannat, of course, is the wine. Wine is always good for you, of course.
Yes.
Red wine in particular. And Tannat, I believe that it's the grape that has got more antioxidants than any other grape variety. So if you're drinking Tannat, you're going to live longer and you're not going to go rusty quite as quickly. And then at the end of April, Jim, our colleague, Jim Baxter, who in the past has been a gin distiller, is going to do an introduction to gin. And his introduction, Catherine's introduction to whiskey back in January was very well received. So we're going to be heading into the spirits world as well. So that's great. So as we said, thank you very much for being with us, and we look forward to seeing you again at another Wine Society event, either on screen like this or indeed in person. Take a look at the website and check out where we are. Good night.